Welcome back, listeners, to Learning from Friends. My name is Kay Curtis, your tour guide on this bi-weekly experience that we get to do together. And you are coming in on an episode part 2. If you have not listened to part 1 with Zachery on discussing BattleTech and MechWarrior, I recommend go on back and get a listen to it first. Because in that first episode, we discuss what is BattleTech, what is MechWarrior, how did he find the series, how the series has transformed from being a tabletop game all the way up to being this massive video game series. And also, he introduced the Grey Death book trilogy to us to kind of get us wound up to start really getting into some more of the deeper information that we're going to go into today in episode 2. Before we get started, we have to do the quote of the day. As promised before, in season 3, we're going to change it up every so often. We'll have some guest people doing quotes. They may be close friends of mine. They may be former guests. They may be family members. We'll find out. But for the first one, as with the very first episode and 1-year anniversary episode, I'm going to have my buddy Chris Bias be able to give us our first quote of the day that's not from my mom. So Chris, take it away.
There is no elevator to success. You have to take the stairs.
Thank you, Chris, for delivering such a great quote to be able to lead us in here on this episode. So let's pick back up on this conversation here with Zachery talking about BattleTech and MechWarrior.
Now, okay, the game series has been around for a while. You said it started back in kind of the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
How many games are there, and what consoles can you get it on?
Currently, there are 14 games in the series, some of them having expansions and spin-offs. The original MechWarrior was a PC game, though it did kind of get a remake for the Super Nintendo. I've played the Super Nintendo version through an emulator. It's not pretty, and I don't really find it all that fun. But back when Super Nintendo, it's really the only thing you'd have for mechs.
True.
The sound effects are kind of funny.
I can imagine that.
MechWarrior 2 got both a PC and original PlayStation release. Though the PlayStation release had a ton of content gutted due to the fact the game plays like a simulator on a PC, that didn't really translate too well to a PlayStation controller.
That's hard.
So it made it kind of more arcadey. It still looked the same. I started playing it on the computer though, and it's very, very sim-like.
That's what I played, was on the computer whenever I got it.
It also had a bit of a multiplayer following. This
I was
was
too
like
poor.
it, this
Couldn't
was
afford
like
that.
in the very early days of like even online play.
Yeah.
I mean, for the most part, most of it was basically just play between two computers in the same house. MechWarrior 3 and 4 were strictly PC, and I consider MechWarrior 4 Mercenaries to be the epitome of the series.
Ooh.
It is the one I have the most fun with, and it's one of the few that I drove myself nuts trying to get to work on my computer. Then there's the Mech Assault games.
Okay.
Mech Assault 1 and 2 were original Xbox titles. They were very arcadey based. Another feature about the Mech Assault games that was weird is all the mechs had a full 360-degree torso twist. There are only a few mechs in the actual setting that have that, one of which is the Urban Mech, which if you need to know what it looks like, just imagine a trash can with legs.
I love it.
Finally, the latest, MechWarrior 5, is on PC and all major consoles, except for the Nintendo Switch. I'm guessing the Switch just probably would not be able to run.
Probably be able to support it, yeah.
There are no gameplay changes between the versions. You
That's
can
a good thing
actually
for once.
play the console versions with a mouse and keyboard if you want. But they translate to controllers okay, because like my buddy Scott, when we play MechWarrior 5 on the computer, he plays with the controller. I prefer mouse and keyboard just because it gives you more buttons to use. The
Love
PC
it.
version also has a rather robust modding community that has added a ton of content. There's also a BattleTech game on the PC that plays very much like the tabletop, and if you're a fan of turn-based strategy games, I'd highly recommend it.
I find it interesting that it was able to get on all these different consoles. Some games are just like so loyal, like you could only be on Nintendo, but being able to get from Xbox, PlayStation, Nintendo, PC, you're covering like all brands there. That's quite impressive.
Now, another series that I didn't really touch on during our conversations during the week is the Mech Commander series.
Okay.
They are older ones and everything. They are not difficult to get running on current computers, though, and everything. I could probably literally just rip one of the games off of my computer, put it on yours, and it would run with no problem.
Huh.
They are real-time strategy games.
Oh, I like that.
And the first one uses sprite animations, and what it does with what little it has is pretty impressive.
All right. Okay.
The second one's fully 3D, and I haven't played much of it as much as the first one, but that's just because I never owned the second one. I really only focused on the first one because it's one that Herb had.
Well, yeah, what's available is what you kind of go with. I remember, I think it was, you actually bought me MechWarrior Mercenaries 2 for a birthday present. And so that's the reason why you start with what you got. And then I remember buying 3 at Walmart for like $5-10, something like that.
3 is a very good one too.
I enjoyed 3.
It's very hard though.
I never could get past most of it. I just enjoyed just kind of going through and blowing things up. And I think that's kind of where I started fading out of video games, kind of at that process. But 3 I like the graphics and the way that I was built.
I would highly recommend you give 4 a try because it's basically a little bit more of the same. And there was a fairly robust modding community for it too. The original game had about, let's see, I want to say like between 18 to 25 mechs in it.
Nice.
The modding community shot that up to over 104.
104.
Yeah.
You're going up. Wow. That's insane. Now, there was a big gap between some of these series in terms of like 2 and 3 were nearly back to back. And then there was a big gap for 4 and a big gap for 5.
Not really. 3 and 4, I think, had at the most maybe a 5-year gap between them.
That's still a big gap in my mind, but that's just me.
But consider the gap between 4 and 5.
Yeah, that was what, 15 years?
Give or take.
Yeah.
Now, one thing that is exciting is they have announced another one, MechWarrior 5 Clans.
Ooh.
Because the company had, like, it's being released by Piranha Games, and the company, like, manager, Russ Bullock, had already said they weren't going to include clans in MechWarrior 5. MechWarrior 5 story basically ends shortly before the clan invasion.
Okay.
They just wanted to make them their own thing because clans would add a ton of content.
That's definitely true. You got to make your money. That's the truth thing as well. And if you want to,
the modding community kind of fixed that though. They've basically added clans into the game already. So, but like to kind of give you an idea, the original MechWarrior 5 had 50 mech chassis to choose from.
Nice.
All Intersphere. You had no clan mechs, of course.
And so now,
and then of course, each one of those chassis usually had different variants.
Mm-hmm.
And then with the DLC they released, they've actually knocked that up to about 60 or about 59, I think.
Nice.
The first DLC they released had 7 mechs. The second DLC, I don't really think had any mechs. The third one added 1 mech, and the fourth one added 1 mech.
Okay.
There's another one coming out that's adding yet another mech.
Another
more
series.
Story. 5 DLCs for a game is actually kind of unusual sometimes. But
you got to be able to find ways to be able to continue to grow.
Some of the mods that have added stuff in the game, especially the clan invasion mod, has probably added another 50, 60 chassis to the game.
But that's the mod community, which is really good to have, though.
And then there is one modder that I love the stuff he's putting in. He is actually releasing classic mechs done in the style of the older games, just upscaled. You can find some of the designs on the internet, like Alan Yo.
Okay.
I think I'm pronouncing his name right. He did a lot of the artwork for like some of the older games, like the old Timberwolf, Spindly, the old Summoner, the old Uziel. This guy has been basically taking the models of that, converting them to 3D models, and putting them in the game. And my God, are some of them gorgeous.
That's whenever someone takes an old idea and makes it new and modifies it to a current modern day.
And then there are a lot of other modders that are actually porting models from like the other games. There's one that's adding the mechs from Mech Assault. There's another one that's adding the mechs from MechWarrior 4. It's pretty impressive.
It
almost makes me want to get into modding, but that would require basically learning a whole nother language because you basically have to know coding to do it. And
yep. But hey, the community's out there. It's one of those things to sit back and spend the time. The knowledge is out there. And that's the cool thing about the time we live in is if you want to learn something, you can sit back and you be able to learn it. We have a special guest coming in for the podcast. My cat Zorro has come in and he may poke up every so often and start demanding food or something. We'll see kind of what happens there. So give us just, for those that are kind of like trying to figure out, give us a little bit of premise of what the game series is.
You're usually split between 2 or 3 things. Budgeting your mercenary outfit if applicable. That usually just only pertains to the mercenary games, or if you're playing like the Mech Commander or a few other others. The arcadey ones are the ones that are mission-based. You might pick a mech that you just have access to at the time and play through. modifying the loadouts of your units, and then the actual conflict setting. The games allow for a ton of customization with many aspects of play. Now, the earlier games actually allowed typically more customization than the later ones, because they would let you basically put weapons anywhere you wanted on the upper torso and arms, head, stuff like that. You typically couldn't put them on legs. You can in the tabletop, but like a good example is like MechWarrior 2 and 3. You could field a assault mech with like 16 machine guns if you wanted.
That's
Surprisingly, that actually does a lot more damage than you think.
But it wouldn't cause you to overheat, though.
Whereas 4 and 5, though, they went up to basically using a hardpoint system.
Okay.
Now, the modders have kind of fixed the hardpoint system in 5. Before then, it was kind of bad. And then, of course, there's also MechWarrior Online, which also uses a similar hardpoint system. That was actually kind of what they were trying to emulate with the mods of MechWarrior 5.
Interesting. Now, can you give us some of the like you mentioned earlier, some of the primer of the 5 Great Houses? Can you go into a little bit more detail about the 5 Great Houses and the Star League in order so we can understand a little bit more about some of the characters?
Keep in mind, a lot of this is basic knowledge, though, or it's just the basic knowledge. I know some of it was like just me in my opinion, so there may be discrepancies. I'd highly recommend if any of these sound interesting to you, visit sarna.net and read up on them, because the lore of the series is really, really deep.
And I'll put a link for that in there.
There is a massive fandom that adds every little bit of stuff they can pull from the books, the gaming resources, stuff like that. There's usually a little bit of info in it for everybody.
Which is important.
First, we're going to go by the faction that is probably one of my top favorites, the Federated Sons, ruled by House Davian. They're kind of based a bit on the European monarchy, and they have a massive sense of honor and sometimes the ego that entails. They are in the Inner Sphere, picturing the Inner Sphere as kind of a circular blob.
Okay.
House Davian is in the bottom right corner. They are an area that spans quite a few light years.
Big size.
Honestly, you could kind of consider they are probably one of the largest factions, with like one of the other ones like probably being a little bit larger, being the Draconis Combine, ruled by House Karita. Davian, I consider them kind of the lesser of the most evils, because I will go ahead and say right now, no faction in this game is completely good.
I can believe that whenever you have your mercenaries.
It's very much political intrigue, very much stab each other in the back, some more than others. Cough, cough, Capella, cough, cough. I tend to just kind of go with I like their government system the most.
Okay.
Because like I said, it's very much kind of European monarchy. They don't really oppress their citizens, though. They've got a robust military. Just like all the other factions, they are pretty much trying to constantly spread their territory. But like I said, because the succession wars and whatnot, it's the whole conflict of all of it is basically just a giant zero-sum game. And you can kind of consider that even when the succession wars are not going, it's still basically just a cold war between all the factions. Everybody wants to get a one-up over each other.
That's something that always is within any sphere. You're trying to see who can maintain power.
Right. To the north of the Federated Sons is the Draconis Combine, House Karita. They are heavily influenced by Japan and tend to sit on more of a feudalistic side. They're also a bit xenophobic to the other houses, but they're overall not a bad faction, and they will accept immigrants from pretty much anybody. It's just, you got to live their way, or you might find yourself at the end of a katana.
Yeah, adaptations.
They're overall not a bad faction, but at the same time, I kind of like to refer to them as space samurai, because they focus a lot on Bushido and whatnot, and sometimes kind of to their detriment. It's been used in a lot of the novels to basically backfire on them royally. They're the frontrunners behind the main antagonist in the first 2 Grey Death books.
Okay.
You still really can't call them evil, though. Like I said, feudal Japan, space samurai, or as one of my buddies refers to them, space weebs, because apparently they also have a little blurb that a lot of the members are obsessed with anime. So apparently anime in the 31st century is still a thing.
I can believe that. It's one of those things. It's a continual storyline.
They are probably my 3rd favorite faction. Granted, playing MechWarrior 5, a lot of times when I'm playing it, they hate me royally. So I like shooting their stuff up.
Hey, if you have the opportunity, take advantage.
The third faction I'm going to go through is the Capellan Confederation, ruled by House Liao. They are based off China, also kind of into the feudalistic, but a bit more totalitarian Chairman Mao's side. They're extremely xenophobic and honestly have committed some of the worst atrocities in the lore post-Succession Wars. They're honestly probably my least favorite faction, and a lot of people online will basically, for lack of a better term, screw the Capellans. You still can't really call them evil.
Okay.
And to some extent, like, their standoffishness is kind of understood because out of all the 5 great houses, they have the smallest amount of territory.
Huh.
They sit between Davion and the 4th faction I'm talking about, the Free Worlds League, ruled by House Merrick. The best way I can explain this faction is they're kind of USA, but a little more anarchy. They do have a central leader, but for the most part are an amalgam of many different government systems that try to work to make this hodgepodge of people functional. They're all kind of piggybacking off one another.
That does make a difference whenever you're trying to find a little bit of control and chaos, I guess.
Yeah, a bit. If you're looking for a faction that's like closest to the United States, though, that's probably the one to go because they probably are one of the ones that have the most freedoms. That can be a downside too, though, because there's a decent bit of corruption. I mean, there's a decent bit of corruption in all of them.
Well, yeah, that's kind of part of it, is that what you were saying. There's a little bit of backstabbing, a little bit of this here and there. But I like how you're saying that there's statements of like, okay, this one's more like samurai. This one's kind of more like the idea
They
of
are
like
all
monarchy.
kind of stereotypical in some ways.
But that's smart. That's good storytelling right there.
And then we'll get to the Lyran Commonwealth, House Steiner. I hope you're a beer drinker. They're based a bit on Austrian ideologies and are by far one of the largest and richest states in the setting. They've also got a little running gag and everything called the Steiner Scout Lance, which is basically dropping 4 atlases, which are one of the largest battle mechs in the setting, into a battlefield for scouting and stealth. Because, hey, you perfect stealth if you leave no witnesses. One of my favorite comments whenever I see them is Achtung intensifies. There's some hilarious videos online about this and everything. I'm going to give a shout out to a group that I love watching their videos, the Black Pants Legion and the Tex.
The Black, is this something that we find on YouTube or something
Yes.
like that? The Black?
They are where I got most of my lore from. Or lore ideas. They have 2 videos on the Ameris Civil War. Each of the videos is about 2.5 hours long.
Wow.
And they've only gotten to where they release about 1 video a year now. But originally, like, their videos would be like maybe like between 7 to 10 minutes. And it's usually just a little burl and battle mechs. Then they
2
started getting into
hours.
the lore,
Wow.
and yeah, they get into like hours. It's like watching a full-on documentary.
At that point, yeah.
And Tex has a silky smooth voice. I just love listening to him.
That makes a big difference as well. If you have someone who can actually like carry you and keep you interested, it's like listen to Morgan Freeman.
He's also the one where I got the term screw the Capellans, because he is an intense hater of the Capellans, and for good reason.
Fair play.
Steiner is probably my second favorite action. And in the lore, they actually merged with the Federated Sons at one point to create the Federated Commonwealth. The merger only lasts a few years, but it's kind of an interesting thing because at one point, they basically have the largest amount of territory in the Inner Sphere until that falls apart.
Well, not everything can last forever.
Following that this is actually not a great house. The Free Ruzzlehog Republic. They're one of considered the newest players in the Inner Sphere, and they are basically a split off of Kurita. They won their independence after the aftermath of the 4th Succession War, and act as sort of a buffer state between the Lyran Commonwealth and the Draconis Combine. I kind of see them as a bit more of a progressive Kurita.
Okay.
They do not last long, because when the clan invasion arrives, the invasion corridor is right smack dab in the middle of their territory. They do kind of get reborn later on by merging with one of the invading clans. The clans, like, at some points can be really xenophobic. And like I said, a lot of their ideals are considered backwards by the Inner Sphere, but then a lot of the Inner Sphere ideals are considered backwards by the clans, so it kind of evens itself out. They wind up merging with the Ghost Bear clan.
Okay.
Basically creating the, I think it's the Ghost Bear Republic. I'm not really sure, but it's basically just Rosalhog merged with the Ghost Bear clan. And the Ghost Bears, like, they're kind of ruling them, but at the same time, they're kind of just integrating with them. They're one of the clans I actually kind of respect. Because there are some clans that I detest with a passion.
As you're supposed to, probably, whenever it comes to storylines.
Mm-hmm. And then there are some that I'm kind of ambivalent on. Now, the two most famous clans of the setting, Jade Falcon and Wolf, are two of the clans I'm kind of ambivalent on. Myself, I like the Jade Falcons, but I'm not really against calling them the Jade Turkeys every once in a while because they've got some issues sometimes. And then we have the last faction, or major faction, aside from the like side factions, Comstar. They're a quasi-religious order that runs the Hyperpulse network, which is a set of where a structure called, well, this is kind of complicated.
Go for it. You do as you got to do for it to explain it, because there's a lot out there.
Yeah. The Hyperpulse network is run by a series of structures on the planets called hyperpulse generators, which are able to beam information through hyperspace, pretty much allowing for near instantaneous communication between worlds. They keep a tight grip on this, so anything you send has to go through them, which means they monitor communications. And being a religious order, not exactly a good thing sometimes.
Yeah.
They also are one of the reasons technology in the setting has stagnated so much, because they are basically trying to keep technology low so as to kind of guide the masses toward what they want and basically just keep it into a zero-sum game. Doesn't really work out for them because, like, at the end of one of the novels and everything, technology is kind of reintroduced and everything, and they start getting back a lot of the stuff they lost. Keep in mind, this is stuff they had lost for like 500 years.
Yeah, whenever you lose something that long, it kind of loses probably some of its original ideas.
Some of the worlds in the setting and everything have technology levels basically on par with like World War II America.
Interesting.
Others that like luckily maybe like avoided some of the conflict in the succession wars or the American Civil War might have a little bit higher. But for the most part, technology is pretty stagnate, which is why a lot of conflicts end in people taking salvage, because gotta fix what you're using. You don't really have anything to replace it. So
that's true.
Comstar also keeps a private army of some of the most powerful tech in existence. And tries, well, like I said, they try to actively stunt technological advancement so as to be in control of the setting as they please. They were a major player, however, in thwarting the clan invasion in 3049. They're also jokingly referred to by many as Space AT&T. Because for all intents and purposes, they are in fact basically a heavily armed telecom community or company.
If they want to control everything, I guess you got to be the monopoly of it.
It's just hilarious that basically a bunch of space fascists invading were beaten by a souped up telecom community or company.
Foreshadowing, hopefully not, for the in the future of if you want to control the world, I guess take care of the technology. Who knows?
Yeah, attack your local Verizon store. Not seriously, I'm not condoning that.
No, we're not condoning it. It's just we're trying to make a joke back. So don't come after us, Verizon specifically, or anybody of that. I'm not brand loyal by any means, so whatever's out there for it. Now, I know that you were big into like the models and getting into the different kind of brands of mechs out there. Can you give some background on that?
A little bit. Right now, the main producer of the miniatures and whatnot is Catalyst Game Labs. And believe me when I say I have taken heavily advantage of the amount of models they've released. I think last I checked, I probably have about 150 different miniatures, all of which I intend to paint at some point.
Yeah, like you said, you could have your own little store.
Pretty much. Well, no, this has nothing to do with my Gunpla.
Oh, gotcha. This is separate.
Yeah. All of these fit into a suitcase, just in the boxes and whatnot that I have them in. And then on top of the ones I have the ones that my buddy Scott and my buddy Casey, I got them for them as gifts because I'm going to wind up painting up their little things as their little like personal factions. And of course, I have more coming pretty soon because apparently I don't know how to not spend money.
You know, when you have a passion that you love,
plastic
you spend
crack.
money on it. There you go. See, I spend a lot of money on bowling balls. I will say that in trying to change my game on that. Everybody has I'm not going to call it a vice, but everybody has a weakness.
It could be worse. I could be into drugs. At least this way I can't afford them.
At the end of the day, it could always be worse. It's not detrimental to your health in a negative way.
Yeah. I could argue against the negative way because like doing some of the things with the miniatures and everything might wind up cutting your fingers up, but that's probably about the only negative health thing you'd have to deal with. And as long as you're careful with the knife or don't use wires for your antennas.
Yeah, knives are always dangerous. Yesterday I was cutting up potatoes and me and potato peelers don't get along. And right the last one I was peeling slash. So, anything can be harmful to you in different ways.
Catalyst produces majority of the plastic minis. There are a couple other ways you can get not necessarily plastic, but like you can also there are files online that people have released and everything for like 3D printed models. I have a few of those.
You say, have you done a couple? Yeah.
I also have a 3D printer. I've actually got two. It's just I haven't got the other one set up yet. I mostly use an FDM 3D printer. That's the type of printer that basically uses printer filament. The other type is resin, which I want to get set up to use, but the resin I have is toxic and I really don't want to open it in the house.
Which is very fair.
Another company that makes models is Ironwind Metals, which, like their name implies, they basically make metal miniatures. Now, you can get old versions of some of the miniatures they do and everything, of which I've got, I think, 5 of those.
Okay.
I've got a classic design Timberwolf that's probably my pride and joy.
Yeah.
And then they also have started making some metal versions of some of the Catalyst miniatures.
Okay.
If I'm right, they also make some of the older designs by another company that made them called Ralpartha. Which, I'm not going to lie, some of their old designs look awesome. Some of their old designs look god-awful ugly.
They all can't be winners.
Yeah. Ralpartha still exists as Ralpartha Legacy. I'm just not really particularly sure they do anything for BattleTech anymore. There are also fans that make custom things and sell them online. I myself have thought about doing that. I've got about 3 or 4 different designs that I'm eventually going to try and 3D model and print up myself. And I might put some feelers out to see if maybe anybody might want to buy them. Because as long as I don't label them as BattleTech, it's fine if I sell them.
That's true because it's your own intellectual property that you're creating.
But, they can fit in with the things so they can still be used, just have to print them the same size.
Now, is there I know there's all these different sites to be able to do stuff. Is there are you looking more for if you were doing this or trying to locate something, would this be on a blog sphere or would you be looking on Etsy or what would you kind of be looking
You
to be able
can buy
to?
some of them off of Etsy. I would be really careful doing this though, because a lot of the ones you find on Etsy are made using rips from the computer games and those are technically illegal. You're technically not supposed to sell those. People still do it, and I'm guilty of buying a few of my own. I have it now because I have my printer.
Yeah.
You can print them all you want. I don't really think Catalyst cares too much about you printing them or getting them that way. You're just not supposed to sell them because they are their intellectual property.
Exactly.
Now, don't quote me on that. Catalyst has been very generous about some of this stuff. So, like I said, I don't think they care. Just cover your bases.
Don't push your luck.
If you're gonna get some, printing them out, or if you're going to buy any and everything, just make sure they're for your own use.
Yeah.
And make sure everything's above board. The websites I usually frequent and everything, you can get some of the miniatures off of Thingiverse. You just want to search American Mecha. Because, like I said, because of this thing and everything, they're not actually supposed to sell them. Thingiverse typically doesn't sell stuff, though, so you can find most of these for free.
Oh, nice.
They're usually not under the name of the mech in the game, but the design's the same.
Gotcha.
You can also get them off of cults. There are some people that sell stuff on cults, but a lot of the stuff they sell on it are reimaginings, which kind of, I think, falls a little more under fair use. Basically taking a design and rebuilding it from the ground up as the way you would want it.
See, I like that. Because you want that creativity, kind of like with the mods.
Right.
Being able to have that creativity, bring in a whole nother realm for it, because it expands the game. That's why I like, fan fiction? Whenever they take an idea and just
I tend to read a lot of that.
Loves a good fan fiction.
Yep.
Now, you have tons, you got to have personal favorites. What is your personal favorite mech?
It really depends on which faction I'm playing as, the Inner Sphere or the clans. If I'm going by the clans, I know the mech as the Thor. You would know it as the Summoner.
I know the Summoner. Yep.
I just love its design. It's a general good choice for an all-rounder, decent speed, good armor, hits really hard, and has good customization. My personal loadout in the older MechWarrior games usually favored a Gauss rifle. I suck at sniping, but I still want to try it.
That at the end of the day, there's no lack of trying, and you build a skill. I was always a getting killed right off the bat because I'd be dumb going in and trying to use long range weapons and short range, and it doesn't work out that well.
If I'm going Inner Sphere, I tend to favor a Cyclops. Specifically, I think it's the CP4Q. The variant I use mounts a whopping 7 SRM-6 racks, which are short-range missiles that launch six of them at a time. 7 of these things basically fire like a shotgun spread. I gotta be almost right up in the enemy's face to use it, but there ain't many mechs that could survive more than 2 hits.
I can believe that. When you're shooting, 6 at a time coming in,
I'll occasionally mount some large lasers on it as an afterthought, just to have something to close on them with.
It's smart to be able to make sure you have that extra deal for it. Now, if you're in close range like that and shooting, do you get kickback as well from you for...
If you were too close to the enemy, yes, the splashback can damage you.
Okay.
I've lost count of how many times playing MechWarrior 2 I've actually blown myself up with my own missiles.
Fair.
Lasers, you don't really have to worry about that because, it's light.
Yeah, directional when it comes to those. Yeah.
And then, of course, there's autocannons and Gauss rifles because who doesn't like a big gun?
Fair. Whenever you're playing a game and trying to destroy another individual, having that little extra weaponry goes a long way. Now, you mentioned that MechWarrior 4 Mercenaries was like your favorite game. Can you give me some reasoning why it is that way?
It has an amazing story. A couple different endings depending on your choices through it. And while it's not the prettiest and is a bit of a pain to get running on modern PC hardware, I still highly recommend it. Ask Chris, he'll agree with me.
Yeah, I'll have to mention him after this one. I have that earmarked to specifically go and ask him about that question. Chris is one of my friends, Chris Bias, who's episode number 1 and was on the recent wrestling episode. Love the guy to death. Shout out, Chris Bias.
Who knows? Maybe one of these days we'll get all 3 of us in here just to talk shop and whatnot. It'd be fun.
That would be definitely fun.
I've never really gotten into the competitive scene for the computer games, though. I mostly played the games for the story.
Okay. So getting into kind of the story really goes a long way in being able to connect things together. Because if you don't have a good story, why in the world are you doing it?
Right.
You got to have a reasoning. If you don't have a rhyme or reasoning, what's why am I investing hours upon hours?
That is one thing that is nice about MechWarrior 5. Like I said, I've got 2 or 3 friends I play with it, and we like making our own little stories in it because it's got a career mode that is very freeform and lets you explore the Inner Sphere at your leisure and fight for whichever great house you want, or some of the side factions in it. There are also the periphery states, which they're basically just smaller factions. They're not really the size of the great houses that dot around the edge of the Inner Sphere. And there are a couple of them I like more than the Inner Sphere factions. One of them is kind of dumb, the reason I like it. The Magistrate of Canopus, because they have cat girls.
Hey, man. Why not? You gotta love it. Whenever you can be able to add in that little creativity. And I love open worlds like that. Whenever you can have an open world and still be able to play within the storyline, it goes a long way. There are several ones that are starting to do that. And I can't remember which saga it was of Star Wars that had an open world. I think it was 7 or 8 years ago. That was really wonderful the way it's played. And I think it's Baldur's Gate, or what's another one that's coming back that's a major open world game that they're bringing. My brain is spacing on what it is.
Baldur's Gate is open world. It is kind of separated a little bit. I've played a little bit of it, but haven't really touched on it much.
Yeah.
I think the Star Wars game you might be thinking of would be KOTOR.
Yep, that's it.
Knights of the Old Republic.
That's it.
Which, another fascinating game, and if you get it on cheap, I'd highly recommend it as well.
Yeah, I remember when it came out of getting a couple of friends and we sat back and we played a little bit here and there, but man, I haven't touched that in a while. I think I played the first year it came out. It's yeah. And then, as with all things, you get started on it, you get excited about it, and then it becomes and
life gets in the way.
Yeah, exactly. Life gets in the way of a lot of things. Now, we've hit on a lot of different directions here. I'm sure there's a lot that I have not touched on. But one of the ones that I did have here is where are we going to think the direction is of this franchise? Because it's been around since the 80s, and there's been 10-year gaps, 15-year gaps between games.
Well, this is kind of a hard answer for me just because when it comes to like the lore and whatnot, I tend to sit like in kind of a comfort zone for it.
Okay.
I haven't really read much going into the lore like past like the year 3070. The lore goes up to like the year 3150. And a good example of it is like one of the clans I mentioned, Clan Wolf, they actually wind up basically recreating the Star League in their own image, referred to as the Wolf Empire. And it gets, like I said, the entire faction gets complicated because shortly out, like there's, like I said, the Succession Wars, then the Clan Invasion, and there are a few things that happen after the Clan Invasion, and then it leads into the Dark Age.
Ooh.
What happens in the Dark Age is basically most of the Hyperpulse network fails
Okay. Makes sense.
and is heavily implied to be due to sabotage. Now, one thing that's handy is it leads to basically the fall from grace of Comstar because, like I said, they are kind of a major thorn in the plot line, and as opposed to creating like problems and whatnot. So by the time of the Wolf Empire, Comstar is basically relegated to your communications. That's it.
Dang.
No more quasi-religious order. No more worshiping the emails.
Worshiping the emails. Love it. Now, do you think there's going to be another gap of another 10, 15 years here between the next one? Or do you think we're going to see a lot more kind of closer span with...
Well, like I said, there is already a new game in the works that hopefully, if everything works out, is slated to come out next year.
Oh,
It
wow.
will take place during the Clan Invasion, but after that, there's no telling what's going on. I imagine Catalyst will still continue releasing content going up to the Wolf Empire era and whatnot, and there are still books being read or books being written.
As long as there's a fan base out there, it will continue.
I would like to think so.
I just hope they don't, where there's some times where they just keep, almost feels like they're beating a dead horse, where you keep going for too long. You're like,
Yeah.
Don't go on for too long. You're killing the story. But, that's
It
part
is
of
handy that, like, well, one of the neat things is they really, like, BattleTech itself really only got into, like, the kind of major mainstream within the past 5 years.
Oh, really?
Before then, it was a very niche setting. Like, yeah, people kind of knew about MechWarrior and everything, but it wasn't really major. And one of the main reasons that like BattleTech like got into like the mainstream lately and everything, like, well, it's like a couple of reasons. One of which is Catalyst decided to up their advertisement,
Okay.
kind of basically just showcasing the thing. They got better at that because before then it really wasn't advertised much.
Fair.
You might find it in like the odd like hobby magazines, stuff like that, but for the most part, like you're not seeing much. Now it's all over the internet. Another thing that caused it to explode is actually due to another company called Games Workshop. They're the ones that do Warhammer 40K. They wound up making some rather negative choices in some of their IP control that a lot of the fans did not like, and a lot of their fans jumped ship to BattleTech.
Well, as a result, if something's not going to like, the best way to take a company down is leave.
Yeah.
Go to the competition.
Now, one thing that like is a bit of like some of the negative has come because trust me, some of the Warhammer 40K fan scene is a bit of a cesspool.
Yeah.
Unless I'm just talking with like a few of my friends, I tend to avoid their fandom for the most part, or just look at art and don't say anything.
Sometimes it's best to just let it go.
Some of that has kind of gotten into BattleTech and has spiraled a little bit out of control in some points. I want to reiterate something that a lot of people, especially in Catalyst, are saying. BattleTech is for everyone.
Okay.
We don't need bigotry or anything like that in it.
True. Thank you. It's a big worry in the world.
I'll be honest, like when it comes to like LGBTQ topics and whatnot, I tend to not think about them much. But I'm also looking at it this way. I'm not going to fault you for your ways. I'm not going to berate you for your ways. Quite frankly, I'm not interested in your ways. If you're a good person, you're a good person, and I want to be around you.
Yeah.
If you're not a good person and you're a bigot and you're just going to be like spew hate, there's the door.
Yeah.
We don't need you in our fandom.
That's what gives everything a bad name, and it just ruins a whole entire just joy.
One of my
for somebody.
favorite comments I found about this is, if you're dedicating your entire personality behind something like your political beliefs, your sexuality, or something like that, you're a very boring person and I don't want to know you.
And that's the nice thing, is we have the opportunity to separate ourselves out in this world and be able to do, if you want to find your people, go find them. Right? Go find them. Don't bring that drama into another room that's not trying to have that.
If I'm having friends over to play BattleTech, I want to shoot each other and stomp your robots. I'm not interested in anything else.
Play the game, man. Time to play the game. That's a fun thing for it, because that's what it should be. You're there to play the game.
Keep your politics out of your fun.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that. Now, there's a lot of things we didn't cover. Is there anything that you want to bring up that, like, hey, you overlooked this. This is important. Let's talk about it real quick. If not, it's totally cool. Just one of those ones I like to leave that open towards the end.
I can't really think about anything at the moment. I mean, could probably pick this up like another time and whatnot. I'd probably have more to say then.
It's a good overview to start people, kind of seeing what's there.
The lore of the series and everything, like I said, it's literally so deep that like there's no way we could cover it in just this single podcast.
I can believe that. I can believe we could probably do like 5-6 hours just
We could probably do an entire series on it. I mean, literally. We could probably do like an entire like 4 or 5 hour episode on just one of the factions.
I can believe that, and I'm sure that content's out there somewhere.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Like I said, another shout out to Tex. I would highly recommend watching the Black Pants Legions.
The Black
lore
Pants
video.
PANTS?
PANTS. I would highly recommend watching some of their lore videos and everything, because they are fascinating and they're set up just like a typical documentary. The intermissions are kind of entertaining. They also have some extremely killer art throughout.
See, that's what really goes a long way for me. I love good artwork.
They've got a bunch of fans and whatnot, and that actually, some of them do art in the styles of like some of the old books. Some of them do art in their own styles and whatnot. So there's going to be a little bit in it for everyone to watch. And you'll learn a lot about the lore.
And you said some of them are like documentary style, 2 hours, 1 hour and 50 minute kind of styles.
They've gotten to where most of their videos nowadays are about anywhere from like low end 1.5 hours to approaching 3 hours.
Nice.
Now the videos on YouTube, they tend to be a little bit longer than that, because they like to create little like fake commercials and whatnot to put in them, which some of them are absolutely hilarious. I love the Discount Dan ones.
Discount Dan. I hope he's selling like used cars or something, or like used mechs. Yeah, there you go. I love it. That's so cool. Yeah, you got to bring humor into it. You got to keep people connected at sometimes, and there's always the commercial break, so why not?
Yeah, check out Discount Dance and everything. We got mechs. You need mechs? We got mechs and everything. You want a mech with an SRM-5? We got a mech with an SRM-5. It was an SRM-6, but one of the missile launchers doesn't work. But that's not going to be a problem. It still shoots. You'll be great.
Oh man, that's so cool. I love it. That made me laugh. You gotta love good cheesy commercials like that.
It literally just sounds like a used car salesman trying to hawk his products. They're hilarious.
I've been recently looking back at commercials from the 90s and the 80s and just like, man, this is gold. At the time, didn't really care, but now it's like, man, they did a good job of really bringing my attention in, and they really did a good job. Because they were characters. That was the whole thing. They were characters.
And the narrator of like all the videos, Tex, like I said, he's got a way with words. Like, I kind of like relate to him. I like to say I relate to him a little bit, because he's a bit of an introvert as well. But he's also just a hilarious orator. And some of the stuff he puts in it and everything is like, a good example is a faction of the original Starleague Defense Force called the Black Watch.
Okay.
They actually wound up kind of being the genesis for Clan Jade Falcon.
Okay.
I'm going to go ahead and preface this. This is going to have a little bit of language in it, because I want to say it the way he says it.
Do it.
The Black Watch wind up having like several battles against Ameris' forces during the Ameris Civil War. And at one point, their base gets nuked. And all that does is piss them off, because they're the motherfucking Black Watch. Apparently, nukes are a minor inconvenience.
A minor inconvenience. I love it. A minor inconvenience.
And especially watching the American Civil War video, you're going to hear that about 3 or 4 times throughout the video, and it's just as hilarious every time.
Yeah, because if that's the catchphrase or something that it kind of goes there for it. Play it up.
It has to do with the Black Watch, at least.
You got to play it up. Now, you did a good job earlier of stating kind of like, hey, if this is the bigotry and all this different stuff being brought into the communities, do you have any last minute things that you would like to give of words of wisdom for our community?
Don't let your life be ruled by hate. It's a waste of time and a waste of energy.
I love that. That is very solid advice right there. Zach, I want to say thank you for sharing your time with me. We're going to go have lunch here in a moment, and I look forward to continuing our conversation. Just in general, it's always fun. It's been a while since we've hung out, so this is really nice to kind of get to catch up. So
hopefully we're going to be able to do this more often now that we're actually back in touch royally.
There we go. It's funny how you reach out to somebody and it can restart back up a relationship, because I think it'd been close to probably somewhere between 5 and 10 years since I last saw you before that.
I wouldn't go that far. I want to say it's probably been about 3, just because like I remember one of the last times we met was me, Scott, and Casey were getting breakfast at Burger King, and we ran into you there, and you just decided, you know what, my friends are leaving. I'm going to go sit with them for a bit.
That's true. Yeah, my parents were sitting there. We were having lunch. Yeah, that's true. It was right before COVID.
Yeah,
I remember that. It was right before COVID.
Probably like late 2018, early 2019. I think I had just graduated from college.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
I guess that is about 5 years.
Yeah, it's about, the thing we're looking at about, time flies, man. When you're 34 years old and you're just kind of like, you don't think about it, because whenever you were kids, you're like, oh, like 5 years is nothing, 3 years, 6 months. And now it's just, we're getting older, Zach. We're getting older.
Welcome to adulthood. I hope you like ibuprofen.
Got to keep a bottle around. That Tylenol, have a prescription of it laying in the back for it. Buy it over the counter. Now, as we leave here, if you want to reach out to me, my email is Cade, which is spelled CADE, @learningfromfriends.com. If you have questions for Zach, I'll filter them over to him and we can be able to respond back and forth that way, because I want to respect his privacy. If you
I will happily throw my email address out. If you have any questions for me, or like want to know anything more about the lore of this and whatnot, my email is weltall1021. That's WELTALL1021 @gmail.com.
Be kind. Don't be mean. Don't email terrible stuff. If you got a question, ask them a good question. That's the thing at the end of the day. I always like to say to kind of protect my guests whenever it comes into doing that. But that's awesome that you want to give that out there.
I would also like to add, if anyone is interested, I only recently set it up, but I do have a Tumblr, which I intend to add some of my artwork to, including some of those mech designs I mentioned about earlier. If you'd be interested in seeing that, my Tumblr is also @weltall1021.
If you want to reach out to me on Facebook, there is a Facebook podcast page, Learning from Friends Podcast, which will come up with the tree logo that says Learning from Friends. Feel free that way. Twitter, I just post episodes up on. I don't really respond back to anything that comes through there. I do have a Patreon page. Come in, donate. It'd be nice to make a little bit of a dollar here and there for it. I recommend, if you have the time, tell your friends about it. Share it by word of mouth. That is the biggest way to be able to spread word about something that you enjoy. If you want to post a link on Facebook or other social media, that's fine. But word of mouth goes a long way for it, because that's how you really build a community, is whenever you engage with somebody. My takeaway from this episode is having a conversation and sitting and listening to someone else's passions about something that you may have not thought about for years is a beautiful, wonderful thing. Like today, with all my episodes, sitting across and hearing somebody be passionate about something, their face lights up. Their voice and tone changes. It's beautiful to see it. Like, it's beautiful.
He calls it being passionate. I call it nerding out.
You know, it's all the same. It's all the same. So yeah, just please share it. That's just, if you enjoy it. If you want to look back, there's 60 plus episodes of catalog that go over these 3 seasons. Search in the topic bar. I'm sure I've got something connected to it, ranging from advocacy to just fun little things, ranging from video games, ranging to just jobs, whatever someone likes. So yeah, feel free. And as we leave here, my name is Cade Curtis, your tour guide on this lovely adventure that I like to call Learning from Friends. And most of all, don't forget, let your curiosity fly high.